Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Farzad Rashidi from Respona, and we are going to be talking today about link building, about organic traffic, about bootstrapping a company, about marketing strategies, and so much more. All these things that you can do to up your game and to market yourself and to grow a business instead of just stagnating. So we're going to be having a lot of fun and talking about origin stories, talking about search engine optimization, and so much more. So Farzad, glad to be talking to you.
Thanks for having me on the show, Robert. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all mine. So can you tell us what you're all about and why we should pay extra close attention today?
100%. So as we chatted a little bit before the show, Robert, I actually started my career in marketing as the first marketing hire at Visme. And for folks who haven't heard of Visme, it's an all-in-one visual communication tool for businesses. You might think of Canva. It's like that on steroids, basically built for businesses versus just the general consumer. So it gives you a little bit more power, gives more flexibility, etc. So back in the time when we started, none of these SaaS tools existed. So we were actually one of the first to market companies with a cool product. And when I came across Visme, it was a small team of engineers, and they were basically working on the product entirely, spend very little time on marketing and actually go-to-market strategy. So my job was just to basically build these pipelines, and they're like, hey, we got this cool product, find a way to sell this thing. So, as a bootstrap company, obviously you got very limited cash, and we were experimenting with different strategies. Obviously, there's three main ones. One, cold outreach, just go door to door, start selling. Problem with that was that unit economics didn't make sense because our product at the time was like $15 a month, super affordable, but it doesn't make sense for you to hire SDRs and AEs and go sell directly to companies individually. And obviously there's paid ads, which is great, it works well, but there's very, I would say, diminishing return on ad spend because you double the budgets as soon as you get a proof of concept, suddenly the conversions don't double. So, and also it's a never ending cash burning machine. So it's quite difficult to scale, especially when you're a bootstrap company. And so we were like, all right, what do we do now? Because obviously there's restraints on our budget, and we want to make sure we build a pipeline for years to come, not just to get a quick win. And so from day one, it was quite clear to us. So Robert, let's say you want to create a presentation or some sort of an infographic for this episode, and you don't already have a software, and you're looking for a software to help you do that. So you're looking for a solution like ours. So say you're a potential customer ours. What's the first step in your research process to find a solution like ours?
So you're saying if I have like a podcast recording like this, and if I want to make like an infographic from it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. What's the first thing you do when it comes to finding a tool that helps you do that? What's the first website you pull up to start searching?
Google.
Exactly. And what do you Google?
I Google infographic software creation tool, something like that. Some phrase.
Exactly. Yep, 100%. So we're like, okay, first of all, our customers are aware of the problem that we are solving. So they're actively looking for it on Google. So instead of us becoming a household name, let's start putting our product, let's start showing up in places where the customers that are looking for us would organically find us. It's a lot more cost-effective way of acquiring customers, and it's very scalable. You're like, awesome, let's start writing some content, put out some blog posts, build some landing pages, and guess what happened?
Nothing.
Absolutely crickets. And we're like, well, this is quite discouraging because, we invested months of resources on this, and we had like 2 visitors. And we're like, we're obviously doing something wrong. So Robert, can we run a little experiment? Can you do me a favor? So one of the keywords you mentioned, like for example, presentation software is one of our main ones. Can you open the little incognito tab on your browser and just look up presentation software on Google?
All right, let's see. So if we do a presentation software on Google.
Awesome. And then you see right below the search bar, it says about X many results with so many zeros. How many zeros do you see? How many search results did it bring up?
I mean, what is it? 1.1 billion, I think it says.
Yep.
So many zeros.
That's right. And there's a bunch of ads, so you automatically ignore them. What are some of the organic results that you pay attention to?
Visme.
There you go.
Front and center.
Exactly. But we didn't get here overnight, right? So how in the world you go? So when we put out pieces of content, everybody was like, yeah, you got to optimize your site. You got to do keyword research. You got to make sure your site is responsive, loads fast. And we did all that. We're like, that's great, but that's what everybody's doing. So let's say even in terms of quality of content, however way you want to define it, even if you're in the top 1%, when there's a billion websites competing with the same keywords, you're still in the millions, right? And none of those get picked up in the first page or in the feature. It's going to be the new search experience, whereas this AI generated feature snippets at the top that's going to discuss, okay, what are some of the best tools for presentation? All of those would depend on you getting yourself up in the search results. So we're like, all right, how do these search engines work? Because we got to figure this out, because how do they go about actually ranking these? And it seems like the way Google won that, you're a young guy, Robert, you probably don't remember this, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, Google wasn't the main search engine. There's AOL and Yahoo, and there's a bunch of other ones that were basically just sort of distributed. And what Google did was coming up with this algorithm called PageRank, which is still the core of the search engine that relies on credibility to base, and credibility is measured in terms of popularity when it comes to the search list. We're going to get into that here in a second. And it's a little cool tip. I always thought PageRank is called the algorithm is called PageRank because they rank pages. It's not. It's because Larry Page came up with it. So that's his last name. Anyhow, going back to the algorithm. So the way they basically define what search results to prioritize, they look at, it's kind of a Mean Girls popularity contest, just like how they measure credibility of research articles, scientific articles, by how many references it gets. You're like, okay, how many of other authoritative websites in your space are talking about you? And it's measured in terms of these little links. So if they're mentioning you're referencing you somehow, and they're linking back to you, and the more websites in your space are talking about you, it's a vote of popularity in the eyes of Google. So now you can't fake it till you make it, right? Because you can stuff keywords on your page, you can create junk stuff. Unless other people also vote for you, you can't get up into search results. We were like, okay, that sounds great. So turns out it's a lot easier said than done to get other people to talk about you. And that's sort of the idea behind Respona that we created as an internal software, because we were doing these researches of, okay, who do we reach out to? How do we collaborate with them? How do we incentivize them to mention us and talk about us, and build relationships with relevant publications in our space? And that process was sort of condensed into an internal software that was kind of like sort of our secret sauce in a way for our marketing team. And it just worked ridiculously well. And we decided to release it as a standalone product. And that's kind of the backstory of how Respona came to be as a standalone tool out of Visme a few years back.
Fun. So it started as an internal tool and then grew into its own company. And so if I'm recapping and understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that the initial strategy or thought or action to take is you say, oh, well, such and such says I should create content. I should make videos and blog posts. And that translates to many months of work. And you create lots of helpful information, but then it's page 1,000 in the Google results because you don't have the page rank, you don't have that network, you don't have people linking back to you. And Google might say, well, it's nice that you created these pages, but if you don't have lots of backlinks from all these other authoritative websites, then we're not going to see much value in your content. Because if you had like a viral article, or you had something that's linked from the Washington Post, New York Times, then that's something that is much more worthy of attention. So now the question is, how does someone get these backlinks? There's this tool Respona where you build backlinks, and sometimes you hear about these things like write guest blog posts, or like find a website with broken links and say, oh, I see you have this broken link, can you link to ours instead? Or people say do a press release, but all those things kind of have a lot of pros and cons to them. Sometimes they seem like there's a lot of time commitment. So what's the answer? How can someone use Respona to sort of solve this SEO ranking game?
Right. So that's a great question, Robert. And first of all, it's not an easy feat, right? And it's why it's a ranking factor. It's one of the most important ranking factors now 20 years in, and nobody can come up with anything better. It's because it's so damn hard to do. If it was an easy plug and play, you press the button and it's done. Again, everybody would have done it. No, it would become meaningless, right? So there's no shady tactic. There's so much malpractice done, and there's so many snake oil salesmen nowadays in the industry that have just tainted the word link building as a concept. And I personally, like, everybody tries to sort of stay away from it. Like, it's like the bastard child of SEO. and to me, the way I define it is basically building relationships with authoritative publications in your niche. That's how I would define it. So building relationships with relevant publications. Now, you can use a variety of different strategies depending on whatever industry you're in. So I can give you some examples. One of them is what I'm doing right now. I'm getting a link from your website, Robert. It's called a podcast outreach strategy. So nobody spammed anyone, right? Basically, yeah, we're here. One of our team members reached out to you and sent an intro, and then we got together and we did some research. We're like, okay, here are topics that we could add value to our audience. So I spend 30 minutes of my time or an hour of my time coming in, helping you create an episode. And then you help us by obviously putting Respona as basically advocating for us to your audience. And at the same time, and we're getting a link from your website. So that sends a signal to the search engines that, hey, Respona is a legit platform because there are smart people in our space, like Robert, that are talking about it. And now, it's not to say I'm only here just because of a backlink, right? There's a lot more efficient ways that doesn't require me to spend time that we could employ. But for me, there's multiple bursts ahead. Most important one is building relationships with people like yourself and kind of having that face-to-face interaction. So I've made it a mission of mine to go on one podcast episode every week and a podcast that I see that we can add value. So how Respona plays in this particular strategy, again, this is one out of a few dozen different ways on how you can do this, is by looking up any people of interest in your industry. So Respona looks at, for example, what are other SaaS founders, other marketers in that space. They go on other relevant podcasts, and it finds their latest interviews, looks at the podcast popularity metrics and sees, okay, does anyone listen to this show? Okay, great. Who's the right person to reach out? And it turns out it's Robert, who's the host of the show. What's their email address? What's the best way to contact them? All of that stuff is fully automated and up to the point that it puts together the email template. And then we put all the metrics in front of you. And then we also have a feature where we'll listen to the 5 minutes of the podcast interview that you've done with our person of interest, summarizes the episode in 5 key sentences. Then we can use to actually personalize the pitch, and we do some research ourselves just to double check to make sure and this is a podcast that is relevant and I can add value based on our story and based on your previous episodes. So Respona basically puts the whole process together. So that whole outreach effort that we do takes 10 minutes of our team every week. And an agency would charge you thousands of dollars a month to do this for you. But Respona sort of, you just click a button, put in your keywords, and it's automatically done. So that whole process is sort of brought together under one roof, and it's done basically all the scraping, all the data finding and research process is automated so that you can focus more on building relationships, managing the replies.
Amazing. And so just to kind of digest what you said there is you're saying that a strategy that you like to employ is appearing on one podcast per week, because that way you get the backlink and all that, but you also get the relationships, you get the unique content. And I imagine that for you, it's also fun to just sort of get your message figured out and make sure that you're kind of like always evolving with what you're saying in your marketing and things like that. And so what this involves, as far as let's say if you were trying to do this strategy manually, you would figure out who's kind of the clone or the lookalike of you as sort of the influencer, right? Like not necessarily cloning the audience, but cloning the marketer that you want to, that you're in a similar space with. And so you look at what that person does as far as the podcast shows that they're on, and you get that list and you filter down that list versus down to which podcasts have a good audience, which ones are relevant. And then you use this tool to do some scraping. and to look at what that kind of clone target did and get a little bit of a 5-minute audio and summarize it, and then and then also get the contact details for the podcast host, and then kind of have this customized template, and then kind of do the follow-up game, and then get booked on these shows and show up and spread your message and add value and have a fun conversation. And doing all that manually, like you said, it's either thousands of dollars to some agency, or if you were to do it yourself or with a team, there'd be so many moving parts, so much of just so many documents, so many shared files, and throwing and catching the ball. And so I can see how it can be so helpful to have kind of an all-in-one dashboard to see all these contacts and filter them out, and also see where they're at in the process. And I imagine that that's something that's not really talked about a lot, is that sometimes it takes weeks or months to get on a show, right? From finding it to all the marketing and finding a time slot. And that's not talked about a lot. And if you were just trying to manage that just by the emails that were in your inbox, I can imagine that falls apart quickly, that you might say, oh, I forgot to reply to that one podcast show 5 months ago. And so, so what sort of things can someone see in the dashboard in Respona? Like what kind of, if someone's like never used it, never seen it, what would you say to try to sell them on using this tool versus the other alternatives we talked about?
Right. So first of all, I always discourage people from jumping into Respona from the get-go. So if you've never done any sort of outreach or anything, don't purchase all these fancy tools from day one, right? Start doing some manual outreach yourself, just to kind of experience the pain a little bit. And it will also help you figure out what would be the right platform to use to streamline a lot of that and to save time. That's at the end of the day, our value prop is that, hey, you can do what you would do manually just 100 times faster. So just to also elaborate, podcast outreach is 5% of our strategy. So on a monthly basis, we get around 80 to 100 mentions a month per person that does outreach at Respona. And they get booked me 4 or 5 interviews a month. So that's 4 or 5%, I would say, of our strategy. So there's 95% we don't get to cover today because we only have 20 minutes. So there's wide variety of different tactics you can employ. But as far as the general flow, I would say that Respona has no magic to it. So all I just described, you can go through and do manually, right? But the good thing about it is that machines and algorithms can do this millions of operations per second, and instead of a human going in and clicking through these things. So my recommendation for anybody who's listening, pull up iTunes, it's free, and look up a podcast that you'd like to go on or you've been listening to. Hit up Robert, look up his LinkedIn, hit him up. You probably have your email even listed there. Send them a manual email, right? So you can do all of that manually. And then once you hit a point, you're like, hey, this is awesome. This works great. And I'm ready to streamline this and turn it into a system so I can replicate this. So I've been on 60 podcasts over the course of the past year. Again, with 10 minutes a week requiring our time, because we're a very small team. So I have to be super productive. So then a platform like Respona would become a no-brainer at that point, because then you're like, okay, yeah, this thing saves me hours of time every single week. So that would be sort of my 2 cents.
I love it. Try it first using basically writing long division by hand. And then once you see the pain and the value, then switch over to the calculator where you can just push the button. And so that some way someone can get kind of that appreciation of, okay, sure, you can pull up iTunes and find some podcasts someone's been on and make that list. But then it's probably 3 to 6 steps to go from the iTunes listing to finding the guest website, hunting around and finding the guest details. Well, is there an email there? No, there's probably a contact form there. Well, I guess I'll search their name on LinkedIn or on Facebook and then try to get the email there. And it's already like many steps just to get that one contact. And then never mind the personalizing, and never mind like 4 or 5 follow-ups just to make sure they saw the message. And so you do that with even 10 or 20, podcast guests, and you're like, okay, I just put in 10 hours of work to get on 2 podcast shows, and at least it works, and at least someone can see the way forward, but then they can then use the tool to accelerate and amplify the results and get a lot more done in less time. And so as we both know here, Farzad, is that there's a tool, and it can be the most powerful tool in the world, right? It can be Google or Chat GPT, but it's useless unless someone uses the tool properly. So would you say that with Respona, is there a common mistake that people make when using it? Or is there like the opposite of that? Or is there like a really area to focus? Is there like a mistake, or is there a big success as far as using Respona?
Right. Well, no, that's a great question. And yes, 100%. There's lots of malpractice done in the space, like people just, blasting emails and spamming. And we've, in the platform of Respona, we made it so difficult to mess it up that it's that rarely happens nowadays, because we have like plug and play templates. So for example, let's say one of the easiest ways you can get some mentions in the door is that you can look up an unlinked mention campaign, where you can look up all the mentions of your brand that other people have already talked about, but they actually haven't linked to your site. So Respona automatically finds them, checks the site, and makes sure that they haven't linked to you. And so you can reach out and say, hey, Robert, thank you so much for giving us a mention. I appreciate that. Before I share it on our social, I was wondering if you can make it clickable, just in case your visitors would like to learn more. So bam, you get it. Or listicles. Hey, I noticed that you listed top tools for SEO and haven't mentioned Respona. Can I get you free access on the house? Maybe invite you even to our affiliate program if you were kind to give us a mention if you liked it. All sorts of strategies like that, right? So that basically requires normally tens of hours, and I would say we have 12 average folks full-time that are doing this on the business side. Same level of productivity. If you were to do it manually, you need over 100 people. So kind of getting all that sort of together, we made some plug and play templates. So you just give us the keywords, give us your basically website, and then you just click next, launch, you're good to go. So it builds the email template for you, finds the right people, gets the right contacts. So a lot of other tools that you would use normally, email marketing tools, they're not built for these sort of average. They're either built for salespeople or they're built for newsletters like MailChimp, etc. So you can load it up with a bunch of emails you buy out of Fiverr, and then you just start spamming everyone. And those sort of emails that just simply don't work. So lots of folks, they just think that volume is going to solve their problem when it comes to email outreach. And there's definitely some truth to that. You do need some numbers to make sure that you get a meaningful number of results. But sort of going through these strategies, making sure that there's something in it for the other person. There's always a mutually beneficial collaboration that happens in each one of these strategies. So when you reach out to someone, all the recipient cares about is what's in it for them. And you want to collaborate with people that you can add value to. And another mistake is, okay, I can easily just offer them cash, right? But say, Robert, if I had reached out to you and said, hey, Robert, can you give me a link from your website for $200? Would you even respond to an email like that?
No, it seems scammy.
Okay, there you go. Because it is. And so most of the time, there's so many of these strategies that I see that just grinds my gears. I'm like, why are you doing this? It just doesn't work. And you're wasting your time and ruining your email domain reputation, tainting your brand's name. And so these are stuff that we sort of put in place so that makes it very hard to do in Respona, and so that you kind of have a proven, I would say, framework that you just click and plug and play for any industry, for any website. So that sort of makes it easier to kind of follow best practices.
I like that a lot. And so you mentioned best practices, and it just makes me think back to earlier in our conversation, we were talking about Google's strategy of the link popularity. And the reason why it works is because in 20 years, no one has thought of anything better. And in 20 years, who knows if they will. Maybe AI will be some kind of weird black box by then. But in 20 years, no one has thought of a better Google ranking strategy than who's linking to you. And likewise, with search engine optimization, there's always all kinds of new strategies and things you can do. But in general, like the overall plan, 20 years ago, if you went to Alta Vista listed websites, your websites on DMOZ or something, and you said, okay, I see that you mentioned my brand and it's not a link. Can you fix it? That would have worked 20 years ago. I see that you have a listicle about backlink tools, but I'm not in that list. Can I be in that list? And here's our affiliate program, or here's just a way to link to us. That would have worked 20 years ago. And what changes over the many years is the implementation of it, are the specifics, but the overall technique. And you've been mentioning this whole time about building relationships and talking to people versus just like blasting. That seems like a good way to wrap our head around all of there's like, it's almost like superstition, right? Where like all the Google loads in all kinds of rules and then rolls back rules, and there's Google slaps and things change. But what doesn't change is kind of these overall tried and true foundational methods. And then a tool like Respona just helps us to do it in a few clicks instead of all this extra legwork. So it makes a lot of sense why we should be pursuing these SEO strategies and why we should be using Respona to make sense of all these things and make it easy. Like you mentioned, how it makes the email template for you and it's very point and click instead of all this manual labor. And so how does somebody who's listening or watching the podcast know if they're a good fit for your tool, and how do they take action and start using it?
Yeah, so we normally have we have thousands of users. Again, we have a self-serve platform with a very affordable price point. So we have thousands of customers that are basically using it in different ways. But majority of our obviously customers are marketing agencies, so people that offer these sort of things as a service to the clients. So they charge their clients $5,000 to $8,000 a month, and then they use Respona for $100 to $200 a month and implement all these strategies and put the rest in their pocket. Or SaaS companies. So again, companies that have any sort of product that would benefit from all of these strategies, because especially with Google releasing that generative AI snippets, it's becoming more imperative not to only to optimize your own site, but also get featured on other websites. Because guess where these AIs are getting trained on? It's getting trained on all these collective of these websites that's on the internet. So the more brand mentions you have, the more mentions you have. They not only have to be hyperlinked, but as long as they're talking about you, something that's never going to go away, you need to get other people to talk about your brand. It's just general marketing. And so as far as the, I would say that target customers go, agencies, the SaaS is sort of our forte, but we also have a suite of, I would say, commerce products. There's lots of folks in the publishers that are either affiliate marketers or I'm not sure we've heard of like Generation Iron, and we're just doing a case study with them soon. They're a big, famous publisher in the fitness space. So again, there's lots of different use cases for the tool. I know it's not a great marketing strategy to cater to everyone, but I would say SaaS and marketing tends to, I would say, constitute the majority of our users, but we do have folks in different industries, I would say.
Okay, well, exciting times ahead, and especially for people that are listening to what you have to say about, you need to be talking to people, right? You can't just be creating the link, the meta tags and the H2 tags. You need to actually be going out there and developing those relationships, from being on podcasts to sending the cold emails to networking on social media and all those things. And Respona is your tool to do that and to make sense of that. And how does someone go and create an account, and what do they do?
Yep. So Respona.com, Respona.com. We have a free trial, no credit card, demos, and we have lots of free educational, I would say, content. We also have a template library. So if you want to know just what the tool does, and each one has like tutorial videos and just explains exactly what the templates are for. So even if you don't have budgets to start with a tool like that, you can definitely just follow these processes manually. So it's all publicly available. You could go ahead and just follow through. Until you're at a point that, again, you're ready to scale, and then at that point it's a no-brainer. So yeah, come check us out. And my name is Farzad Rashidi. Aren't a whole lot of us out there, so best way to get a hold of me if you have any questions is LinkedIn.
Fantastic. So on LinkedIn, add Farzad, that's FARZAD, and then check out Respona, RESPONA.com to start building your backlinks. And so as we wrap up our conversation here, Farzad, you've been around the block a few times. You've seen all of the internet change so much. You've been through all these entrepreneurial journeys, from being in Visme, now being in Respona, and all these, and growing these companies. Is there a piece of advice that you wish you'd gotten 20 years ago? If your present self could go back in time 20, 25 years and tell your younger self something, does anything come to mind about just the advice you wish you'd gotten 20 years ago?
Right. Well, 20 years ago, I'm in my late 20s, so I would probably be in elementary school at the time. So probably can't give me too much advice. But still,
there's life advice in there, right?
Right. And that's something my co-founder and mentor, Payman, who's the founder of Visme, says to me a lot, and that is, good things take time. And I'm a person who's go all the time and wants to make things happen yesterday. And so it doesn't, things don't quite work like that. Good things take time. And as long as you're putting your best every single day, it's important to keep it consistent and wait for results to start coming in over time. You don't get discouraged too much when you don't get immediate satisfaction from a lot of the things that you do. So that's my points of wisdom, I would say.
I love it. Patience, as long as it's combined with consistency and persistence, and it doesn't mean resting on your laurels and just hoping it works out, but also patience that the lag time in the actions you take will pay off later once you've built the backlinks, once you've made the relationships, once you've made the mistakes, once you've done the marketing, once you've grown the business, etc. Patience that it will work out. Well, wonderful. And so to make sure that you are being consistent in your business with your backlinks and your podcast guesting and your brand mentions, guest blogging, etc., go right now to Respona.com. That's Respona.com. Click on the Start for Free button, create that account, start using it, get hooked on it. You're going to love it. You use it to build your business, Respona.com. And thank you very much, Farzad, for showing up and for blowing our minds and giving us some good foundational lessons and reminders, but also giving us some new ideas. I really appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you again for having me on the show, Robert. It was my pleasure.
My pleasure. Right back at you.